Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for our March webinar. I'm just thrilled to have Dr. Becky Liu-Lastres with us today. She's an expert in the field of risk management. She's going to share a very important presentation with us on crisis communication. This presentation is more important now than ever, especially with what's going on with the pandemic and the variety of emergencies and different events that have happened in the last year. So it is my pleasure to introduce Becky and turn it over to her to share with you, again, another really valued source of information and knowledge. So Becky, thanks so much for joining us here on the ETI webinar.
Hi, everyone. My name is Becky. I'm just very happy and privileged to be here and share some of my findings and some of my insights gathered from my research. So without further ado, I'm gonna start to share my presentation and we can get things started. All right, so the topic of my webinar today is crisis management and communication tips for event professionals. So this is what we're going to go through today. There will be 4 sessions, which we'll first start it with like a 101 in crisis management and communication. So I will introduce some key concepts, how to set the foundation, so everybody will know what we'll be talking about mainly in the rest of the webinar. And then I want to give you a little background of the impact of COVID-19 on the event industry and a little bit information about my research project surrounding the event professionals, and the event professionals and how do they cope with the COVID-19, how do they cope with the risk and crisis management practices. And lastly, based on the findings of my projects, I'll be able to share some tips that can help you guys to be better prepared and for future success. So when we talk about crisis, very interestingly, if you're written in Chinese, actually it can be broken apart into 2 characters. So the first one involves danger, involves the uncertainty or the negative aspects and a lot of damages that associated with crisis events. And the other part actually represents opportunity. So when we look at crisis, although most of our attention naturally paid to the negative aspect, we'll see how devastating it is, how impactful it is, how it's gonna harm our industry. But in the meantime, I just want to bring your attention to the fact that there's an opportunity part in there as well. And for us as an individual or as an organization, a lot of this opportunity lies in the learning function, the social learning function. So through critically reviewing what we have been through and what we do right, what we do wrong, actually is a very, very valuable lesson for us to improve our future practices. So in terms of the realms of crisis and risk management, we do have several concepts that we can briefly go through. So the first one is risk management. I think this is a term that everybody is very familiar with, and it's becoming more and more important in the event field. If you go to a lot of professional association conferences, they normally do have like a risk management section, or they have some guidelines, some tips for people to really help you to cope with different type of risk management. So traditionally, when we talk about risk management, we tend to focus on the future. We tend to aiming at preventing the occurrence of a problem. So by reducing the risk, avoiding the risk, transferring the risk to others, the goal of risk management is just prevent its occurrence. So therefore, there would not be a major problem when we're holding events. And then we have another term is crisis management. So also traditionally thinking within crisis management is focusing on present. So it's more about solving problems that take place when planning events or doing events. And also aim at solving the occurring issues. So what will be the immediate solution to a problem? And sometimes people may think these are two complete different concepts because risk management looking at preventing issues, while crisis management looking at fixing existing issues. But what I want to tell you is that right now, the boundary between risk and crisis management has been blended. Instead of looking them as two concepts, we cannot ignore the fact that it actually can be put into a comprehensive framework, because we sometimes refer crisis management as a failed risk management, because if you didn't handle the risk properly in the beginning, then the issue occurs and just naturally it becomes a crisis management for you. And also, contemporary definition of crisis management is more comprehensive now. For example, in tourism, we always use like a 4R framework, like reduction, readiness, response, recovery. So you can see actually in the pre-crisis phase, they do kind of cover a lot things that risk management covers, which is on reducing the risk and increasing the preparedness. And if like, unfortunately, and crisis really takes place and affect your organization, affect the field like what we're experiencing now, we enter the recovery phase. And during the recovery phase, that's very important concept that we have been talking about a lot right now is resilience. So resilience refers to an organization's ability to bounce back and recover at a faster speed. So it really refers to how fast you can rebound from the negative situation. It's very important because you don't want to take forever to recover from COVID, for example. You do looking for quick solutions and things that can help you to build this long-term success. As we say, when we review what we have been through during the crisis situation, one of the goals that we're aiming now is really to increase your resilience and reach your long-term success and become more resilient, sustainable. So if anything happen again in the future, we can just quickly bounce back and we'll be able to handle it with more confidence. And also throughout the process, another very aspect that we talk about a lot is communication. So for communication, it includes internal and external communication. So for internal communication, it refers to how you disseminate the information within your organization. You know, in the pre-crisis phases, it will be like how you train your staff, how you involve them into the risk planning process, how do you assign the function to each them if an emergency happens. So internal communication is to make sure that everybody's on the same page within your organization and within your team. And we also have external communication. External communication is a little bit sophisticated because during the pre-crisis phase, external communication is more about, you know, creating this sense of safety or climate, and how you communicate with different partners, stakeholders, and attendees, vendors. So you do have this kind of information flow going on externally. And also during and after a crisis, there's a very critical component for crisis communication, because how you respond, how you handle these issues also goes to your reputation, which is intangible but very critical, because in the end, a lot of times when we evaluate a brand or evaluate product, evaluate company, reputation is an intangible asset that we have to focus on as well. So therefore, using the right strategy to communicate externally is going to directly benefit you for building a long-term reputation and long-term branding as well. So therefore, communication is also very important, both internally and externally. And throughout the process, you know, for planning for risk management, crisis management, or reaching organizational resilience, communication is an essential part that goes through all this process, and it's also part that we will always need to pay attention to. So this is like the basic concepts that we'll deal with within the realm of crisis management, although there's a lot, there's more to it, but this will be 3 concepts that really helps us to understand the foundation, which is the risk management, crisis management, and resilience. And also throughout the process, it's about communication, which includes internal and external communication. So another thing that when we talk about a lot a lot this importance of crisis and risk management. We talk a lot about the resilience. The thing is, we also wanted to see how they are being practiced or how they're being applied in reality. So that's why we're using the COVID-19 as a context and really to examine how the event professionals are doing in terms of risk, crisis management, and in terms of how they build their resilience within the organization during this difficult time. So let's look at how bad is the impact of COVID-19. So from the survey results from MPI and PCMA, you will see there's direct response to the policy, the lockdown, and to the situation is just to cancel the event or just to postpone the events. And with these events being canceled and postponed to an uncertain time frame, it actually also lead to a huge negative economic impact, which, as you see, almost half of the planners and the majority of the suppliers do indicate a very severe financial impact on their organization, even over the next 12 months because of COVID-19. And also for us, for the event professionals, being all this event being canceled, postponed, it just directly pose a threat to your job security. So a lot of them either get flawed or get laid off. Just things are becoming a little bit severe for us individual as well. So as you can see, the impact of the COVID-19 is very severe, both on the hosting actual events and also the benefit and performance of the organization, and also for individual event professionals, it can also be very severe. But actually, health-related issues have been discussed in risk management, especially in the past 10 years. But a lot of the discussion is really about health hazards. We look at food safety, we look at water quality, we look at how people handle foods, but health epidemics has not been the major issue that we look at, although it does take place in the past 20 years and has created different impacts. So for example, in 2003, the SARS really destroyed the tourism industry in Asia. And just 10 years ago, 2010, we have the H1N1, the influenza that really affect America. And also recently have 5 years ago, have an Ebola outbreak that really affects the African area. So health epidemic is not an old issue. And also from previous experiences, we actually can also see how it's impacting the tourism industry and how much damage it can be done. So actually, it's really a predictable surprise, right? Because we see all the damage it's creating here. So the thing is, how do the event industry really respond to it? So a little bit of background of this study. I've been always interested in tourism crisis management and communication. So when I first went to IUPUI, I was able to get this faculty support research grant. And that's when I started to interview event planners about their risk and crisis management practices, like how they plan for risk, how they handle crisis, and what have they done for the COVID for uncertain situations. And then we started interview in December 2019, and then in early 2020, the coronavirus outbreak took place. So our focus has also been switched to not only on regular risk and crisis management, but also on how they really respond to this timely issue. And also when we conduct an interview with them, talking to them has been very helpful as well, because you can also see the transformation of how they apply their regular risk and crisis management skills to a very unique context, that's the health epidemic, which a lot of event planners have experienced in the past, but still find it very challenging right now. Why? So more specifically, I am asking a set of questions. So for example, we're asking, are they prepared? How do they cope with the situation? And throughout this COVID situation, throughout these several months, who made it and how, who failed and why. And also, when we talk about crisis management, we look at the negative side. We also look at the positive side. So what are the opportunities that are laying between? And also, ultimately, by reviewing these experiences, can we be resilient, sustainable, and successful in the long term? So first, we look at the regular risk and crisis management plans, right? So in the book, we always say every organization should have a risk and crisis management in place and updated regularly. And we also say that this plan should be very comprehensive. It should cover like a risk reduction, response, recovery, readiness. We also talk about like we should consider all types of risks ranging from health hazards to like crowd management. If it's an outdoor event, we look at the weather stage. So we do consider all types of risks, and we also do a risk assessment, look at what is the possibility of the risk event taking place, how severe the consequence is, and what will be the strategy. We have like strategy for reducing, avoiding, transferring. So we have all kinds of this kind of books and like guidelines or things in the book that we think if we follow it well, then we should be able to handle all type of risks and crisis. And in our findings, we do notice something that's very interesting. So first, everyone agreed on the importance of risk management plan because they all think if you don't have a risk management plan in place, you are setting up yourself for failure, because if things happen, you don't know how to handle it and you don't know how to manage it, you don't have an answer to it. So that will be the nightmare for events. But in reality, even though they do acknowledge the importance of having risk management plan, not everyone have one in hand. So, and also how they develop the risk management procedure varies. So as we say in the book, we have all kinds of ways, methods, analytical methods you can use. We also do, like scenario-based planning. You brainstorm what will be the worst scenario, all kinds of scenarios that may happen. But in reality, they probably do not do that. Normally, they will as simple as just a guideline or just like a brainstorm session. Or it can be very comprehensive, as we say, go through hours and hours of scenario-based planning to outline all kinds of scenarios, really think outside the box. Or they just have even have created like SOP, standard operation procedure. So they outline the key functions of everyone and the key personals. If things happen, people do know who to go and how to manage it. So the procedure really varies. You can just have like common sense, simple guideline to a very comprehensive one. And some of the very, very well-developed one will be based on the event, based on the venue, based on the client's needs, based on the organization's own policy. Some of the event organizations have their own risk management department, and they will have policy you need to comply with. So there will be like simple ones that's just very simple to very complicated and comprehensive ones that covers everything. So this is very interesting. So in regular times, we know it's important to have a risk and crisis management plan, but in reality, not everyone has one. And even though you have one, some of them can be just as simple as a guideline that you need to follow, or will be a very comprehensive one that covers different scenarios and have all the things outlined. So this is very interesting. In regular times, this is how most event professionals handle risk and crisis. And then we also look at what really affecting them, right? So why would you go really far and have this kind of develop this very comprehensive plan when why some of you just stay with whatever you have? One thing we do notice is the environment that's really important. So the ongoing issues really affect people's involvement or decisions of creating the event. So the crisis and risk management plan. So for example, after 9/11, so there's an update of all the security equipments, especially the venues. They updated, they have electronic locks, they will have more severe security equipments, things like that. And also another thing, so for example, right now, COVID is a huge thing that's affecting people. So it really brings people's awareness on the health and cleanliness and sanitation. So ongoing issues definitely will bring people's attention to the risk and crisis management. And also depending on what's going on, what's the focus of the current event, the concentration also varies. It could either be on the health part, also on the security part. And also because of what's going on, they also do a lot like risk management or risk assessment issues as well. And environment is also related to situational awareness, because you need to always stay sharp when you are in this field. You want to capture the current trends, and you also wanted to make sure that you are reflecting what is the current needs. So that's why the ongoing issues is a very important external element that affects their decisions. And then actually the core of their efforts in creating risk and crisis management plans are personal expertise. This is very interesting. So when I talk about personal expertise, I break it down to 3 parts. The first one is industry experiences. This is very interesting. So the longer they are in the industry, the more developed or well-crafted risk and crisis management they have. So for example, we talked to one event planner. She has been in the field for more than 20 years. She has her own company, very successful. So for her, risk and crisis management is very, very important. Every time when she's hosting events, she will brainstorm with her team, have scenario-based planning very thoroughly. What she do is plan for the worst and make sure that everything is taken care of. And she also really appreciates thinking outside the box to think what may happen, what may negatively impact. So that's very interesting. So the longer you are in the field, the more you experience. It's very interesting. They're actually paying more attention to risk crisis management, and they also feel like they gradually develop with their own procedure to how to handle the risk, things like that. And also previous crisis experience that kind of like consistent with industry experiences. A lot of people who have been through negative incidents before become more alerted, aware of this issue. Some of the young, like who are just in the field probably like a year or 2 years, risk and crisis management is not really in their radar. They were just very fortunate because throughout their experiences, they didn't really experience any negative incidents. Therefore, they just didn't think of planning for the worst when they're hosting events. And lastly is the knowledge. So it's important that you're aware the importance of risk and crisis management plan. It's also very important for you to decide how to plan it. So the knowledge comes from different resources. Some of them from the book, like you learn from school, and some of them actually comes from the professional trainings, and a lot of associations like MPI, PCMA, they all have this risk and crisis management trainings in their conferences, and a lot of event planners will go there and read it and learn about it, and therefore become more knowledgeable in this field, in this area. So personal expertise is definitely one of the core elements affecting their behaviors, and that's really helpful for them to create different kind of plans. And lastly is for the organization. This is very interesting as well, because a lot of in-house planners, for them, their organization do have a risk management department, and they do have specific requirements they need to comply with. So this is a very useful element with the organization. Also within this organization, they also always have support and resources allocated to support planning, creating risk and crisis management plans. And also previous experiences, if this event company has experienced negative incidents before, they're more likely to pay attention to this area, and they provide more support because they have experienced the negative aspect. Therefore, they're allocating more resources to support it. And size matters. This has been talked in the book a lot. They always think the larger organization is better prepared because they have more resources, a larger size of reserve So if anything happened, they can support them right away. But in our study, actually, we found out that a lot of those independent third-party planners are also very flexible because the small size they have, they can flexibly arrange their tasks. They hire a lot of part-time people depending on their needs. So if things happen, like a negative incident happened, they have to cancel the event, their loss is somehow manageable because they have a very flexible structure within the smaller organization, which really helps them to handle the crisis and negative incidents. And lastly, in training and continuous education, a lot of organizations will send their staff for more training in this area, which is also very helpful for them to become more professional, become more comfortable in this area. Okay, so what we talked about before are just the regular risk and crisis management plans. So how do they deal with things that in regular settings? But now, very important is we go to the COVID-19. So even though a lot of people we talk to, they have a really good risk management plan, they're very experienced, they have all the knowledge and expertise, but COVID-19 is still a very, I guess, as we called before, predictable surprise that caught people off guard. So for our findings, this a very interesting thing. The first one is immediate response. So the first case of COVID-19 reported in January 2020, and it was first involved in Asia, and then it was not until March, I think, it got in the United States, and then we have this lockdown, and we have this lockdown, and we have the stay-at-home executive order. So throughout this process, when the pandemic first started, to the extent that it's evolving, the more and more cases reported, is a very critical period that as an event planner or professional, you need to provide immediate response. So at this process, a lot of them involve risk assessment. How risky it is. And the decision making, are you going to cancel the event, host the event, or are you going to postpone the event? And how are you going to communicate within the organization and with your stakeholders, with your partners? And also, how are you going to allocate your resources? So for the very remaining resources you have now, how are you going to allocate those resources? So very interestingly, it was not until the stay-home order came out that most event professionals decided to cancel the event. A lot of them actually are watching, because when they go through the risk assessment and decision making, a huge part here is the insurance and the revenue. So for smaller events that mainly depend on the events to generate revenue, this is a huge impact, because if you don't host this event, you're going to lose a lot of money. And health epidemic traditionally is not part of the insurance package. So if they cancel the event, they're not going to get the compensation from the insurance company. So this has become a very hard decision for them, is how are you going to balance your revenue, your insurance, and the money you're going to lose in this point. And however, things has happened. We have to go through the short-term responses. Is during the March to summer is when we start to getting used to the new normal. You start to see how people adapting to the new people's new normal, and how they really become more adaptive, and they need to come up with some responses to the situation. So throughout this process, I think the three things that really emerge are the adaptivity, collaboration, and innovation. So in terms of adaptivity, we're really adapting to this new normal. People are become suspicious. They become very concerned about safety, and they have a new requirement on cleanliness and sanitation and safety as well. And then is the collaboration. This is a very interesting point. So we see a lot of collaboration between event professionals and with other industry partners. So Indy, for example, they will generate this hospitality task force to have people from all the sectors like hotels, events. They'll come together, and they have government people on board as well. Then they would discuss what will be the most appropriate strategy that you can use what will be the most updated health and sanitation standards they can follow. So this is a collaboration how they can come up with strategies that can be promote industry-wide. And also lastly is how can you be more innovative? Because as we say before, if you largely rely on events and being all the events being canceled and postponed, there's like a huge loss in your revenue stream. So how are you going to become more innovative and create more revenue has become a major issue as well. And in this case, so for example, we have a musical festival we talked to, and for them, they're trying to produce like digital version of the music and then charge for the loyalty and things like that as a alternative revenue stream. And also they were trying to make advantage of a lot of sponsorship they already got, and they prevent like different alternative solutions to see would that also be satisfy sponsors' needs. And also they wanted to see what would be the good way can we, so for example, like traditionally you have like a 5K, and can we do it like a virtual event and also still collect some part of registration as the revenue. So people become very creative and innovative in terms of coming up with different revenue streams. And lastly, and also I think it's probably the most important thing that has been discussed a lot right now is how do you create this climate of safety event in the recovery phase, especially during now. We have with the vaccine rolling out, we do have like events coming back in place. Although we have a lot of sanitation and cleanliness practice in place, but still people are asking the question, how can you create a sense of safe events among people? You know, how event attendees perceive safety is very subjective. So what would be the most important thing for them to create and generate this kind of sense of safety is also a very key question to ask at this point. So when we talk to the event professionals, a lot of them do use, email newsletters or like some of the reminders to tell the participants what they have done to ensure event safety. And by delivering this type of information, also is very essential to create this kind of sense of safe event. And they also feel more assured with all this information. So again, when doing the recovery and phase, communication, especially the communication with your potential clients, is very important because the type of information you're delivering is directly contribute to their sense of safety. If you can demonstrate a good controllability of the event, like for example, you list what you have done and what is going to be done at the event to ensure safety, this helps them to have more confidence in these measures, and also in the end they will have a stronger sense of safety for the event and eventually increase their willingness to go to an event and to travel. So lastly, I do have tips for the event professionals because I ask a lot of questions, and instead of telling you what to do, what we should do, I think this will be a very useful list of questions that we can always ask ourselves to review our practices. So for example, as an event professional, are we like more proactive or reactive? Are you the ones that really think ahead, or you more focusing on issues that are happening now? And also, are you more like a risk taker, or you're like a risk aversive? So are you going to, when uncertainty rose, when, for example, COVID-19, the case start to escalate. So what would you react? Are you going to take the risk, like still host your event and pray for the best? Or you are more like a risk aversive, you rather prioritize safety? This is a tricky question. And also, are you always prepared? Are you willing to think outside the box? Do you have solutions to most of the issues that may come? So are you adaptive? If, for example, we enter a new normal, just like now, people are like earlier, people worry about safety. They have different expectation. They have this different, they have different expectation. So can you be adaptive to this type of new climate? Are you innovative? Again, when your revenue stream was cut, your biggest revenue stream, the events are canceled, can you can you come up with alternative strategies to create new revenue stream? How are you going to still maintain your biggest assets with the community, with your fans, with your participants? And also, can you handle different types of risks? As we talked about before, in the book, you have a very comprehensive list of risks. You have like human-made, you have technical, you have nature hazards, even like health, we talk about health risks. You have different way to control food safety, SOP for food safety, crowd management, water quality, but COVID still catch people off hand. So if there's like kind of surprise like this happens, can you handle it? So this is like for individual as an event professional. So for organizations in the field, there are some questions we can ask to how flexible is your organization and product? So if things happen, can you quickly adjust your revenue stream? Can you quickly, be adapt to the new market and the new demands? Can you quickly just reallocate your resources and create new products? Do you have a diversified revenue stream? I think this is thing that we notice mostly is if you completely rely on face-to-face events, it's going to get really hard when things like this happen. So do you have a diversified revenue stream? So for example, can any of your events be switched to hybrid digital format but still generate revenue? Do you have any, products you can sell or merchandise you can sell based on the events you host and still be able to generate revenue? So these will be things that you need to think about as well. How can you create a diversified revenue stream? Do you have a reserve? Because during these difficult times, it looks like the reserve is the most critical and assets that helps the organization to go through. Are you aware of your internal resources and your Slack resources? So Slack resources refers to the resources that have not been used on a regular basis. So for example, the musical festival we talked about before, their major product is still the music festival, right? Because they have a long history, they have like a very strong fan space, they have a really good brand. So actually the music video is type of the Slack resources. They don't use it often, but right now it becomes a major revenue stream because they were able to label it, sell it, and make loyalty fee out of it. So this is the Slack resources that people that we're talking about. Do you have any kind of resources there within your organization, within your product line that you can use but you didn't pay enough attention to? And also the internal resources. I think right now as event professional, one thing people are facing is that if you want to keep a job, you need to have multiple skill sets. So similarly, if you're at a manager position, are you aware of like your internal talents? Do your people or employee have multiple skills, and what will be the biggest internal resource you can use at this critical time at the lowest cost? This is another thing for them to think about. And also external resources. As I say, collaboration is a huge important asset during the recovery phase. How you're going to work with your community partners, how you work with your fans, how attendees, how you work with the industry partners becomes very critical because for example, they have this new industry-wide sanitation and cleanliness measures being established, and with the support of the health department, they have the most up-to-date information. This really boosts the confidence in consumers, which in turn supports our recovery phase and also correspond to the theme of creating safe events. And lastly, for your future planning, both for your organization and event, there's some questions to think about as well. Have you going to address the sense of safe event? As we talked about before, communication is important. And another thing is, do you know what people value now? Do you know how attendees create this sense of safety? Do you know how can you deliver this sense of safety for them at this very critical moment? And also, how are you going to be prepared for risks and crises? So we do have like a traditional list of risks, but if any predictable surprises happening, are you able to, solve and co-respond and to deal with these issues as well? And also, how are you going to build a resilient organization? So now we all know resilience means how soon you bounce back for the negative situation. And based on what we have talked about before, would you be able to enhance this sense of resilience in your future planning? So it's not only just looking at issue, but also think about this, incorporate this feature in your culture, and maybe do the long-term planning so that we can be more successful and sustainable. So this is a list of questions that I think we ask ourselves based on some of the insights we get. And I think it would be helpful for us just to rethink this whole risk and crisis management and how we like reincorporate this sense of resilience during the process. All right, so this is the end of the conversation and the presentation. So thank you for the listening. Just want to know if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask, or you can just always contact me for more information. Sure.
Anybody?
Why she's always on? Amanda, you're mute.
I'm sorry. Did you see the question about from one of the attendees, is risk management cost effective?
I think this is a very, very interesting question because we talked about, I think we got this from another conversation we had. A lot of times when we do risk management, insurance is one of the most methods that people use, right? Because it covers a lot of the incidents and things like that. But the thing is, a lot of big companies, when they do risk management, like when they purchase insurance, it's like a 3-year or like a 5-year term. It's like a long term. So 3 years ago, you wouldn't see COVID-19 coming out. So I think that's one thing that for those really big organizations, when they at the point if they need to cancel the event or not, they are hesitated because the insurance company doesn't cover. So, but if you're looking at the magnitude of the issue, it also depends on like what type of risk management you want to do, right? You want to do, as say, can be very simple as the small brainstorm session within your event team. As long as you outline the key personnel for emergency situation, that may cover it. Or you want to do like a very big one, like right now, COVID-19 after this, everybody's updating the risk management plan. I'm pretty sure health epidemic will be included in the insurance from now on. So it really depends on what's your goal. And again, go back to your revenue structure and revenue stream. How do you balance that? To be honest, based on what we're seeing now, I think we should do more risk management just because of what we have lost. However, to what extent you want to do it and what's the money side, revenue side, you need to really depend going back to the organization and the structure of them.
Yeah, and maybe the question now is, what is the cost if you don't do it? If you're not doing anything with risk management, it can really cost you now if something were major to happen again, such as a pandemic. So not only what is the cost, but are you willing to roll the dice by not doing it? Because this could really, again, come back and bite you. We do have another question in the chat.
The difference in the risk management protocols in larger company and small ones, two-factor, yes and no. So yes, in terms of the bigger companies do have a more comprehensive, as I say, they have their own risk management department, which require their in-house planners to comply some of the requirements. And the smaller ones, for example, if they're doing some of the events for like smaller organization, they probably don't. But again, the event planner's expertise plays a huge role in there because one of the event planner we talked to, she has her own company, 20 years industry experiences. So her organization is small, but her risk management procedure is very comprehensive. She has her own procedure that works the most. So again, that goes back to the expertise of the event planner.
Do we have any other last minute questions for Dr. Becky? Becky, can you tell us a little bit maybe about the course that you're looking to maybe teach here coming up in the spring, summer around risk management and COVID?
Yes, for sure. So I'm going to teach a special topic course. The topic now is pandemic and tourism, but actually it's really looking at risk and crisis management in tourism hospitality. So we're going to go through a case studies. So it's going to be very interesting because it's more than just books, all those concepts and terms, but more about application. So we're going to go see a lot how hospitality business go through the different crises, like Chipotle and their food poisoning crisis, like the cruise line and then norovirus crisis, like the hotels and the bed bug crisis. So those are real examples. So by reviewing those examples and discuss what has been done to address the issue properly, it's just gonna be very fun to look at the reality. And by examining and looking at all these things, it's just gonna help you have a better understanding of what will be the right one to do, what will be the right strategy, and what kind of things you need to consider when you are in the position.
Again, I know we feel like we're in a pandemic and we're in the biggest crisis, that our industry has ever had. And has been an unprecedented year in terms of impact on our industry with the coronavirus, but we're having crisis all the time. I mean, there's always going to be everything from, again, security issues to safety and sanitation issues, just a whole host of, again, risks that an event organizer is going to have to face. So again, using this time to really think through your risk plan is critical. So again, down the line, as things come up, you're not caught off guard. You really have a solid, not only plan, but a mitigation strategy in place. And then of course, if you have a crisis, how do you communicate that will be more important than ever in gaining that confidence back of your event attendee or your customers. So again, this has been a very relevant and timely topic for us, Becky. And again, if we have any last minute questions, we'll be happy to answer those, or we can, again, kind of wrap up with a thank you. So I'll give everybody just another minute here to see if there's any additional questions from our attendees. All right. Well, hearing none, Becky, again, on behalf of the whole Event and Tourism Institute team, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. I hope you get more students involved in that class. I think it'll be critical for our students to understand the importance of risk and crisis management. And again, thank you for your time and your effort in putting this together.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for listening. And I'm just very happy to be here and share the findings. Thank you.
Before we close, I do want to mention that we do have an April webinar coming up. Dr. Yaoyi Fu will be with us, and she's going to talk about cultivating students' global and intercultural education. So it's going to be another great session on, again, how important it is for our students to not just think US-centric, but to have a global mindset, a diverse and inclusive mindset as they go into the tourism and hospitality workforce. So Dr. Fu has done some really unique things with working with some other institutions outside of the US, and she's going to share her perspective on how important this is, and also what we're doing here at IUPUI to foster that goal for our students. So again, please look for that information, and registration is open. So thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you in April. Thanks, Becky. Great job.